Good morning, everyone. I think it's interesting to note that in the history of religions throughout the world, in previous civilizations before Christianity, you always have theistic religions, polytheistic religions, of course. And in that, you see very human characteristics reflected in the way that gods are personified. In a certain sense, you see almost the worst of human interaction among the gods. You see competition, rivalry, hatred, all these things between different gods, always competing against each other to be able to explain natural calamities. You see Poseidon fighting against so-and-so and such on. But with the Lord, there is the revelation, of course, of the true God, but also a revelation against an indifferent God. There's also the idea that God has perhaps created the world, but taken a step back. The solemnity of the Sacred Heart shows us that God is neither one of extreme passions that can't control himself, or one that is extremely wrathful, that rivals with other gods, or that rivals for our attention. Neither is he one that creates and just walks away indifferent to the very particulars of our lives. But rather, he is one who constantly shows his Sacred Heart and wills it to be wounded for us, not passively but actively says, I lay down my life. I give my Sacred Heart completely over for you. And that's, as St. Paul says, that's the confidence that we can approach the throne of grace, to be able to approach God in that way, because he has already shown, as we heard in the gospel today, the depths of his love. And he shows us even the depths of his love again through this vision that Saint Margaret had of being able to see the fire of God's love that he has for the world, so as to consume the world in a sense. Today is a solemnity. That means that the celebration of this day says something very true about our faith. So it shows the revelation of the passion of God's love. It shows us how God loves the world. It also shows the reality of the incarnation, that God takes onto himself human nature, that within the Trinity for all of eternity, again, at the fall, there's a separation between humanity and divinity. But in this moment when God comes down and assumes human nature, from now on, for all of eternity, there is a beating human heart that understands our passions, as able to sympathize with every human experience that we have, so that we can, again, have that confidence with him. But there's also the reality of the teaching of the communion of saints within this devotion and within this celebration, because God's Sacred Heart is intended to be replicated in every single one of us through the action of his grace. The opening prayer said just that we may receive an outpouring of grace within our own hearts. And in a very real sense, every saint that we canonize is again a vision of that Sacred Heart that St. Margaret witnessed, to be able to love and to be able to adore. And particularly, we as Catholics have a great recourse to grow in sanctity, really the only recourse to grow in sanctity, and that's through the Eucharist itself. There's a very beautiful Eucharistic miracle in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, I think from 2008, if I'm not mistaken, where, I forget his name, Dr. Carlos Castaneda. He was an atheist doctor who was commissioned to work on this Eucharistic miracle. And at the time, Pope Francis was Bishop of Buenos Aires. He was just Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Bishop Bergoglio. And he asked Dr. Castaneda to work on this Eucharistic miracle, and it led to his conversion, because the host had been transformed, not transubstantiated, but transformed visibly into heart tissue of a wounded man, a man who had experienced great physical and even emotional trauma, and you can tell because of the nature of the tissue that the host had turned into. And that is the same reality that we receive ourselves. It's that same sacrificial love, that same woundedness that when we receive the Eucharist, we receive into our own hearts, so that our hearts cannot remain where they are, but that they can be transformed and really become a constant vision of God's love into the world. And so whenever we feel tepid, or whenever we feel lukewarm in receiving communion, then we have to recall to mind these great visions, these great miracles that the Lord has gifted us to be able to approach communion and say, I'm receiving the Sacred Heart of Jesus completely into my body and soul, and it's transforming my heart. And in that exchange, to give to the Lord disordered passions, disordered sentiments, anger, frustration, everything that is messy with human experience, so that he can take those things away and put in his sentiments, compassion, love, kindness, goodness in our hearts. And that is the process of holiness that we receive through the Sacred Heart of Jesus.